Hi, my phone says 1:30, and we want to respect your time. We certainly appreciate you for being here right on time. We're going to get started. I know the lunch went a little bit late, so we have people that are just now making their way over. And in fact, we have one of our panelists, I think, that is running a little behind with the traffic and the parking situation here. So when she arrives, you'll just see her make her way up to the front. My name is Tina Jordan. I'm the Vice President of Membership for AFCEA International, and I'm excited to welcome you to today's panel. Women in AFCEA hold several of these events throughout the year, including the annual Women's Appreciation event held at West in San Diego each February, and the Women in Cyber panel series. Other panels will be held at AFCEA International's TechNet Augusta in Georgia this August, and at TechNet Asia Pacific in Hawaii this November. All the Women in Cyber panels are followed by an open Meet the Panelists reception. Today, we are happy to invite you to the reception, which will take place at 4 p.m. in the Sharp Street lobby on the 3rd floor of the Convention Center. When you exit the theater, please sure to get a drink ticket because you will want to use that at the reception, and you only get drink tickets if you attend this panel. So you have to make sure you get your ticket on the way out. I want to mention that this panel has been approved for continuing education credits. However, you do have to stay for the full hour to receive the credit. So be sure to get your badge scanned before you exit the theater at 2:30. We cannot scan badges once you have left the theater. Can I have the person in the back who's scanning badges raise your hand? There we go. If you would just make sure and check out with her when you leave and have your badge scanned if you'd like to get the continuing education units. If you are an AFCEA member, we will provide the documentation for you. You can sign up for membership if you're not already a member over in the AFCEA booth. Membership is $50. You joining during this event, you get a 10% discount, and we'll provide all of the documentation for you. So with that, I would like to introduce Mr. Jeff Verant, Vice President and General Manager of Government Solutions at Ciena Corporation. Ciena and Walker & Associates are joint sponsors who make this panel and the follow-on reception possible. Jeff will introduce the moderator of the panel, but for now, please join me in a warm welcome for Jeff Verant.
Thank you very much. Okay, so why am I doing this? 2 reasons, real quick. One reason, women in AFCEA and women in Ciena, we have an organization called Women in Ciena. Those are a big deal to us. AFCEA is a big deal to us. We will always support this organization, and we will always support women in AFCEA. Specifically, we have 5 global regions and over 20 chapters internationally of Women in Ciena. And we have employed, and we still employ, a lot of very talented women. The second reason is personally, I think I come from a family of very strong men and very strong women. On my father's side, 5 brothers went to World War II, 2 came back, okay? So, you know, that's kind of what led me to go down the military career path. On my mother's side, I'll just tell a little story about my grandmother in Missouri. You've all heard stories about the little schoolhouse on the hill. My grandmother really taught at a little schoolhouse on the hill in horse and buggy days in the 1930s, and my mother went to that school. She was a very, very strong woman. I can recall days when she would buck bales and then go home and cook these awesome noodles. I still remember. And on one occasion, I even remember her telling a story about John Dillinger gang knocking on her door in the 1930s, and she welcomed him in and cooked him a ham. So it was a very, very good story. All right. So I was told I'm not allowed to read the entire introduction to Admiral Elizabeth Hight. I'll read the first part of it. I know we've had some family acquaintances too at Ciena over the past, so it's an honor to be able to introduce her. She's a retired U.S. Navy Rear Admiral who served as the Vice Director of DISA from April 2007 to December 2010. And I guess what else? The only other thing I was going to say about her, she's been an AFCEA member since 1977. So thank you very much for your time and speaking on this panel, this great panel of for women in cyber that we have here today, and welcome Admiral Hight to the stage. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right.
I told him to just say I'm a retired sailor and go sit down, but you know, he did more than that. So all of you standing in the back, please feel free to sit down. We actually have some free chairs up here in the front row. We don't bite, even though we are women in cyber. You can see that one of our panelists is stuck in traffic, as all of us were trying to get here during the ball game preparations. As soon as Dr. Emma gets here, Susan's going to ask her to just join us, and then I will include her in some of the conversations that we have planned for you. Well, good afternoon, and welcome to the most provocative discussion of the entire symposium, Women in Cyber. Our goal today is to provide you with a call to action, so if you think you're just going to listen and nod away, think again. We want you to walk away with a commitment to make change happen, not only for our future, but for the future of our daughters, our sons, our granddaughters, our grandsons, our nieces, our neighbors. You get the idea. So be prepared to take notes and get busy. And don't forget to formulate your questions for the panel, because we would like to invite you to come up to the microphone at any point where you have a question and interrupt us. We're pretty flexible. You know why? Because we're women. So please do that. Well, it's my great pleasure today to introduce you to three unsung heroes of the cyber world who were doing cyber way before there was this thing called cyber. I don't have enough time to go through each person's bio, so please read those for yourself on the AFCEA website, or better yet, join us later today for a networking event where you can meet and interact with our experts. Dr. Emma Garrison-Alexander, who will be here soon, is an educator today, but she has been an engineer, a government agency's CIO, a critical member of teams protecting our government's facilities, resources, and intelligence assets. Marianne Bailey, who also began as an engineer, is right in the thick of things, managing the national security systems that carry our classified or sensitive information vital to the success of our military, intelligence community, and government operations. Doreen Harwood has worked in both the private sector and the government, expanding the cryptologic infrastructure, as well as modernizing that dreadfully complex DoD acquisition system. Today, she supports critical cyber organizations, many of whom are within a 15-mile radius of this convention center. So on the surface, it appears that these women have very different career paths, choices, but in reality their paths share many parallels, some of which you will hear about today. They all started their government careers at the National Security Agency and have served in government for more than 30 years. They continue to contribute to the common defense of the United States, and they have all remained committed to that goal. But they've also recognized the need to look to the future with diversity and inclusion. I'll let them tell you their story of the past, their view of the present, and their hopes for the future. So, Doreen and Marianne, if you'd start our discussion today with how and why you began your cyber journey.
Okay, I'll be happy to start. So I think I was quite fortunate because I was the youngest in my family of four, and my oldest brother set the path for all of us in taking the technical classes in high school. The math classes, physics, calculus, those types of things. That was kind of normal to me. All of my siblings took that, and I was exposed to that. But the one thing, and of course I had a father that was not a technical person like we are, but that was very, very supportive of us doing anything that we wanted to do and pushing us farther and farther. And if you're going to do something, you do it right. So definitely kind of learned an ethic there. But in high school, I had a physics teacher. And it's kind of interesting because I hadn't really thought much about it until last year when I won a federal award for women in technology, and we had to say who influenced you to come into this career, and they wrote it and they published it. And it was my high school physics teacher, and not necessarily because of physics. I mean, he made our class very, very difficult, so it was very challenging for me. So personally, it was one of the times where probably in high school I felt the most challenged, which motivated me to, hey, this is something I really like, what could I do in this? But he kind of stepped out of that role, and he gave each one of us a project that we had to do in our physics class, which was to pick 5 careers we would want to pursue, investigate 5 colleges for each one of those, list the pros and cons of each one of those, and nobody had done that in my high school at the time. So it really made me start thinking in 11th grade what I wanted to do, where I wanted to go, and kind of set things in motion. Oh, also, what kind of a job would you get in that field? Then after that, so I stayed with that. I went into mechanical engineering. Most of the things that I felt an interest in that attracted me were mechanical aptitude types tests, mechanical things. So I decided to go into mechanical engineering, did that for a very, very short period of time. And then I moved over into much more, there weren't networks back then when I came in, so I couldn't have been a network security person, didn't exist. And but I moved on into other areas of my career. Obviously, I've loved it. I think it's been wonderful, and all the different things that I've done. I kind of laugh when we talk about kids today, or young men and ladies today, and say they're going to have 5 or 6 careers in a lifetime. I think many of us have had that. Because there have been so many different types of technology or areas that we focus in as we've grown up. So maybe not much more apparent, and we didn't make it much more as present and talk about it as we do today. But I think we have, and it's been awesome for me.
That's great. So now I've just heard that we have something else in common: great parents. So my father was a CMP. Prior to AT&T, CMP telephone repairman, and my mother was a medical secretary. And I was in high school, and my pivot point, like your physics, really was my mother. She said, even though you want to take typing, take math, At that time, you could always take a couple extra classes, and she was like, yes, typing is good, you're going to need to type, there will be keyboards forever, but please take that extra math class. And so that extra math class led to associates in computer science, and then BS in business, and then a master's in finance. And so I really credit wonderful teachers, but really good parents who knew what they had gone through and what their careers led them to, and then wanted more for my brother and I, and pushed us into higher education and telling us that there really were no limits, which is, I think, we all tell our children these days, that there are no limits. And that, I think, we're going to explore a little bit on the panel.
Roger that. Well, so now that you've been in this cyber world, oh, good, here's Dr. Emma. Great, so glad you made it. Did you have trouble parking?
Traffic. Finding this room, they sent me to the back.
Well, we're so glad you made it.
Thank you.
So, I live in Northern Virginia. I had no idea that there was a ball game today at Camden Yards. So, of course, I got here just as everybody else had finished parking. So that was interesting. But we're so glad you're joining us. And we've been talking about how Marianne and Doreen started their cyber journey, and if you could give us a couple of minutes on how you started yours.
Yes, so first of all, thanks for the opportunity to be a part of this panel and to serve with these two ladies. My background from an educational perspective, my undergraduate degree is in electrical engineering, and as a result of that, NSA, or the National Security Agency, in case you don't know who they are, recruited me right out of college. And so this was my first, working for NSA was my first real job. And I started by doing a lot of hands-on work, which was still available in the government at the time. So I was doing hardware design around microprocessors. I was writing assembly language coding and other types of software.
You guys know what that is? Assembly language? Yeah.
Yeah, that's the lower level programming where you really get to program the hardware. And then I had the opportunity then to move more into the systems engineering arena. And then I started working with networks, doing system administration work with operating system, using scripting languages as a part of my job. And all of those things coming together really gave me a really good background to understand the cybersecurity environment. And then I went on to do other things on the mission side that also tied in. I spent 2 or 3 assignments in the Information Assurance Directorate doing systems engineering architecture for the Pentagon. And then I also had the opportunity to be a senior operations officer at NSA, overseeing all of the mission areas on behalf of 2 directors, General Hayden and also General Alexander. Then I left after working in counterterrorism for a while and with the military, and went over to TSA to become their CIO. And in that role, I was responsible for all things IT, including the cybersecurity mission for the agency, and also working with the other CIOs for the Department of Homeland Security as well. And so I had all that responsibility. So my background from a technical perspective and a mission perspective really helped me as I continue to work in the field.
Great. Well, thinking about the past is one thing. Let's think about the future for a minute. Where do you think the cyber world will be in about 10 years? And would you recommend your daughter, granddaughter, niece, young neighborhood friend to go into the cyber world, and why? Doreen?
So projections are that there will be 1.5 million openings for cyber professionals by the year 2020. Also, there will be roughly 3, I think probably 4 times as many hacks, intrusions, you name it, a span of bad things that happen on the internet during that same time period. And presently, globally, third world countries to first world countries, there is roughly 5 to 11% of that workforce that are women, although the global percentage of women is 50%. So there's this huge delta of opportunity, and there's a huge need, and the issue is, why isn't the need driving more women? And I would say also driving just general diversity into the career field. So my nirvana of 2020 is that we have an absolute diverse workforce, attentive to cyber, learning cyber from a young age, and we'll talk about the educational system. I'm sure you'll jump in on that, so I was counting on that. But it really needs to be diverse for a number of reasons. Research says that teams of, and we'll just do male-females pretty evenly, are more creative, they solve problems quicker, and they create a better work environment, just to have that general split male-female regardless of other diversity factors. And in order for us to stay ahead of the power curve, make the technological leaps, and I was talking to a young man coming up here, very similar to the space race back in the 60s. And if we've all seen Hidden Figures this year, yes? Those wonderful ladies? That's where the differences are made. So we here today are helping with that, helping spur the conversation about the gap, and then we'll get in a little bit to things that can be done, are being done now, and can be done by all of us sitting here, each of us taking an action in order to address that.
Great, thanks. Marianne?
So as I look ahead, like our question was, where do you think it would be in 20 years? I can't even fathom where it's going to be in 20 years because, we're challenged with where it's going to be in 5 years and where it's come in the last 5 years. It is amazing. It is in every sector that you can think of. It used to be, we thought about this mainly in the defense sector originally, and then it went to our Homeland Security sector, obviously finance sector. Now today, telematics, think of automobiles, right? There is not an area that you can think about where we're not worried about cyber, and there will be more and more of them. I think the thing that's one of our challenges is that we don't do a really good job explaining all the different careers that you can have in cyber. Right? People think of the guy with the hood, on the. You see that every time you see it, everybody thinks it's a hacker. There are a million different careers you can have in cyber, whether it's policy, whether it's law, legal, whether it's very technical, whether you're a coder. There's just so many opportunities. I think about my job, and I'm definitely very much involved in the technical aspects of it. I spend a lot of time with international partners. I spend a lot of time with industry. I spend a lot of time in the White House, work on policy activities. I spend a lot of time in the Department of Defense working on strategies, and I could go on and on and on. There's so many different things, and beyond all of those things I do, we have teams of people working that. So, and now I'm just looking at the Department of Defense. Go into other sectors, medicine, right, healthcare, anything that has identity or has PII data. It's just endless. It's endless. Where the technology is going to drive us, I think, is so incredibly exciting. And I have to tell a quick little joke, because I had one of the young folks that works for us came in my office and was talking to me about mobility and secure mobility, and he was pretty young. And he said, I don't know if you know this, but they used to have flip phones. And my reaction was not to bust out laughing at him, because I wanted to say, I don't know if you know this, but we used to not have cellular phones.
It's been less than a year when we discovered that we could, in fact, hack a heart pump. And so the company that actually was hacked has spent tremendous time and effort understanding, one, how did it happen, and two, how to prevent it. Now I realize I'm not part of this panel, but I do want to tell you a story. These folks decided that the way they would approach this was they would figure out how to make the heart pump last 10 years. In other words, how do you make a pump that's not crackable last for 10 years? To which I said, okay, well, that sounds like a pretty daunting task. Why don't you think about how to make a heart pump that can be embedded in a person for 10 years, because you don't want your chest cracked open every 4 years, and figure out how you can update the software in the pump. Well, didn't occur to them. You know why? Because they were worried about the pump. I was worried about the person. Makes a big difference. So one of the most important things I learned in that simple story was the power of diversity. You need somebody who's not thinking just like you are. Okay, sorry. Go ahead, Dr. M. That's great.
Yes, so I don't know what things will look like in 5, 10, or even 15 or 20 years. But what I do know today, the cybersecurity problem, the cybersecurity domain, is extremely complex, and it encompasses many, many, many elements. Marianne just talked about some of those elements that are also included. So we don't even think about when we think about the 16 sectors, those are sectors that the government has designated critical to our function as a nation. And if they were to be disrupted, we would not be able to live the lives that we live today. But it includes agriculture and food. We just don't think about all of the elements. Healthcare is the most targeted industry that we have. You might think it would be finance or somewhere else. Finance is like number 2 for being targeted by hackers and those that would do us harm. So it's a very complex problem, and as a result, the solution set is very complex as well. It goes from the technologies that we need to secure our networks, whether it's hardware, software, firmware. It goes to the people that you actually need. HR has to be an integral part of what we do in the future. We have the training aspect, because employees, employers, and individuals play a key role in the cybersecurity solutions, and sometimes we don't see ourselves in that solution set. But as an individual, you have a role to play in cybersecurity as well. So I spoke a couple of times in the last few weeks, and one of the things I said on the complexity side, and I have a diagram that I show to show just how complex it is, and I said most IT professional, most IT security professional, cyber professional, they don't want one more tool to help them secure the network, because they can't work with the tools that they have today. So they really need innovation on how to take those varied solution set integrate them together and really make them work much more effectively. And so that's the brain power. That's the type of brain power that we need to bring to the table in order to bring the right solution set and solution sets that are actually going to work. No guarantees, but we want to be at the highest level of assurance as possible, right? And so we do our due diligence from a solution perspective. The last part of the question, would I encourage my daughters or my children to be a part of the cybersecurity world? And I can say emphatically, yeah. My daughter just graduated from Drexel University in December of last year, and she's working on cloud architecture for Microsoft, and an element of that work is all about security. How do you secure the cloud? So I can say, yes, absolutely. It's a great career field for more than one reason. Beyond diversity, it's great for diversity to be able to bring those varying opinions into the solution set and to help us secure our nation. But on the other hand, it is a great way for a woman to be able to support herself, to be independent. We talk about independence. I saw a statistic that talked about some of these career fields pay 50% more than traditional career fields. So when you think about being independent, if you think about buying that sport car that you really want to drive and not waiting until you're 35, well, this is the field to come into where you can make $70,000, $80,000, $90,000 and you're 22 years old. So the ability to provide for yourself, for your family, and just to change your economic situation, this is a means by which you can get there as well. So there's a personal reason as well as a business reason and a national reason to want to come into the cybersecurity field.
So keying off the education comments. So how many of you out there have heard of the whole of society approach to cyber? By raising your hand.
I only see a couple.
Okay. So in the 2010-ish time frame, I would say the most cyber savvy countries in the world, US, UK, and interestingly enough, Estonia, a friend of mine in the back of the room, Roy, remembers Estonia and those conversations. They, as part of their security strategies, at the global level, and if you go on the UN website, you'll see the security strategies. Those three countries, our three countries, US, UK, Estonia, actually developed not only national security strategies, but cyber strategies. And within those strategies, they all developed whole of society approaches. And what the approach is partnership, cross-government, public-private sector, and actually into nonprofits and community organizations in order to bring cyber education into all facets of our children's lives. Our lives as well as our children's. I shouldn't exclude our lives. And this is something that many of you might be familiar with if you go to the NIST website and you are aware of the NICE activities and those that DHS carries on for the National Institutes of Standards and Technologies. And what that is providing is training, not only training opportunities, changes in curriculum at the kindergarten levels for our children, but also education for our parents. I have 85-year-old parents who have evolved into, using iPads and understanding a level of cybersecurity. And they need that education because, believe it or not, as the person who takes care of their finances now, it's amazing how many strange phone calls they get on their flip phones, by the way. They do that too. And how many, I would say, phishing events associated with their single MasterCard. So it's an awareness, it's a cultural, it's a national problem. And those three countries recognized it as something that just education in the schools wouldn't have the most impact. The most impact would be addressing education from across the span of a person's life and across all economic categories, whether you're a working class or whether you are working for private sector, public sector, whether you're a teacher, whether you're a taxi driver. what are those things that you have to be aware of? Because we're all connected with the internet. So one of the things we all should be very proud of is that we're one of the countries that led in this whole of society approach. And just to give you a little inkling of how far that went in Estonia, a very small country, but you may remember they were cyber hacked by the Russians years and years ago, kind of the first major world incident. They have an all-volunteer cyber National Guard that when their their government network gets hacked, or there's some type of campaign, some type of significant malware, the volunteer force comes from the universities, from government, and from private sector, and they all join together in order to combat whatever's going against their networks, because that was the best way they found when they were hacked by a major superpower in order to defend their way of life, because they went from kind of third world infrastructure to first world internet overnight. And there are many other countries around the globe that are doing the same. So it's really important to understand that we're all part of this whole of society, and I think that'll probably engender a conversation a little later about what we all can do.
Is that next? Is that what you want us to answer next? What are we going to do next? Or
Do you want to add something? Okay, so, we also have a cultural component to that whole of society. There are at least 2 countries that I can think of who don't believe that your personally identifiable information is any big deal, and they just put it out on the net. And they believe that if you don't have a secret, nobody can take advantage of that secret. So their sense of privacy is very different from the sense of privacy that we have here in the United States. So we not only have the technology that's expanding at exponential rates, we have cultural issues as well that we need to think about in a global environment, especially in this world of everything and everyone is networked. So let me just pose an additional question. What steps should we take next? This is your call to action. You need to be thinking about what step you can take next as we discuss several of those that are available. So, Dr. Emma?
So I think in terms of what we do next, I think we've covered and probably made the point that cyber is complex, and we need complex solutions as well, and people to help us take those solutions and make them work for us. But we also need to get more people involved in the cyber fight. That's very, very important. That 1.5 number that Doreen talked about is like a global number of cybersecurity professionals. So if we don't have the people, that's like one of the first pieces of the puzzles that we really need to solve, because the technology alone is just not enough. So we really need to have more initiatives around how do we get more women, how do we get more minorities, how do we get more people in the general population interested in cybersecurity. Under the Cybersecurity National Action Plan, there's an element in there about computer science for all under one of the cyber tenets. And the goal there is really to start right at the beginning of your education, right in K through 12. When you start school, you're going to be exposed to computers and computer security and the things you need to do to secure a computer. So it starts at the beginning. So the goal here is to really make cyber a part of our lives. Now, Marianne, when she said she was going to tell a joke, I thought she was going to say something about how we started our careers together in the exact same office. So I'm glad there wasn't something you remembered that I didn't. And so we always heard, and we still hear it now, and for many people it sounds new. I just sound like I heard it when I first walked in the door. We need to not bolt on security. We need to build it in. So we're really talking about technology in that particular case, but we really need to do the same thing with the human element. We need to make it a part of how we live, because our little tiny children, grandchildren, they know how to use technology, right? So they need to be actually cyber savvy as well. They need to understand the security risk and what their roles are in terms of security configuring those devices and how they use those devices, and whether they click on a phishing email or they respond to someone they don't know, those kinds of things. So I think one of the areas we need to continue to work on is on that human side, that K through 12. Unfortunately, and we're involved in Maryland's Department of Education initiatives on setting up standards and teaching cybersecurity within the education department. But I have a person, Dr. Lois Palin, who's a part of that particular group. And it's interesting that they're focused on computer science, but the only thing they talked about from a cybersecurity perspective was bullying on the internet. And she was like, that's like a small piece of what we need to address. So even with that computer science for all, we need to make sure that we have comprehensive coverage of what cybersecurity is all about, and not just about the coding piece or about the bullying piece. We really need to have a full coverage of all of the different elements of cybersecurity. As a Center of Academic Excellence, the University of Maryland University College, we have responsibilities for working with K through 12. There are many, many initiatives out there where the community colleges are working with the high schools and they're working with the middle schools. We found that the reason we're starting so early is that if you wait too long, if you wait to high school, it's really too late. I worked with the group under the National Initiative for Cyber Education, short name NICE, called Cool Careers for Girls in Cyber. And I worked with girls from Hagerstown, all around this area, Southern Maryland, and it was interesting to look at where their interests were in terms of careers, because we're talking about how do we get people into these careers, and specifically, how do we get girls and women. And I usually worked with them on building computers and understanding the computer parts. They did locks, picking of locks, all kinds of activities related to cyber. And almost always, the girls wanted to do the same thing or something related. They all wanted to do something in fashion or design, the things that we really see on TV that's very, very glamorous. The exception to that, remember, girls from all over the state, the exception are those girls who were exposed to someone who was in the technology field, that were in STEM, science, technology, engineering, math, or science. And it was usually a father that was in that field. Those were almost the only girls that had any interest in anything around STEM. And so that has to change dramatically because they don't see themselves in the field. And I just found it interesting that if you look at television and the impact of television, somehow we got to get cyber on television and into these fashion shows and things like that, so that the girls will actually see themselves and see that there's a connection in a lot of those areas back to the cyber field as well. But I find it pretty amazing. The influence of models is huge. What people see have a huge impact on the things that they desire to do and be a part of.
And of course, that's how our kids learn, is they imitate.
So I definitely want to pick up on Emma's role model, because I really think that's the piece that's missing. We have a lot of things going on in the education arena. We have a lot of things going on across this nation in extracurricular activity. NSA runs a Gen Cyber, but I think I could be anybody from any agency or any company sitting here and tell you that we do this, but we're not being successful yet. We're seeing that women that go into STEM fields, 60% after the first year in school, they drop out. So why does that happen? And a lot of the things that we've looked at are those role models. You're not seeing a lot of female teachers. They're not seeing a lot of female teachers, whether it's in college or whether it's in high school. So they don't see this role model that's talking about this technology or even taking those classes and applying it to what they could be doing or what they would, what they see. When we look at what Emma said about role models, I kind of laugh because I know one of the first things my daughter, when NCIS came out and Abby was on there as the wicked smart person doing all this cool stuff, she's like, I want to be like Abby. I'm like, all right, I get it. That's cool. That's somebody you relate to. But even Abby, how they always... how the media codifies these women. The Abby, it's somebody in goth, right?
Yes.
It's just like the guy with the hood. It can't be the person that doesn't want to be that dressed like that wants to be, more like, many of us dress like us, right? It's not that. It's somebody. So it's like we're definitely not hitting that niche. And there's a lot of studies out there, and I started reading some of them and talking to some folks. NSA has a class that's called Unconscious Bias. It's an excellent class. It's something where we have these biases. We don't even realize it. That's why it's called unconscious. But when you go through these exercises, you realize we have these biases. And there was a postdoctoral thesis on biases in job resumes, job descriptions, right? Job descriptions that go out there, and how all of these technical job descriptions and cybersecurity are really written that they appeal more to men than women. And so they had a study, they rewrote a lot of job descriptions, and it was remarkable what they saw. They wrote it in ways that it would appeal to a female, much more than just appeal to a man. And another thing that I wanted to mention was Maria Clow, who was the president of Harvey Mudd. She came in 2006. She decided to put this into practice. So the average female graduates in computer science across the nation is 16% today. That's what it is. So what she did was she went in and she intentionally, over a period of a handful of years, put women in key positions, leading departments in the school, leading technical departments, teaching technical classes. Today, they graduate, 55% of their computer science graduates are women. So she has seen a direct impact, and it supports a lot of these studies that when we have conferences, you need to see more women on panels, right? In K through 12, right, you need to see women highlighted more. And I mean, all of us studied John Glenn, all these great, great male heroes, but we didn't study, the female heroes, and they're out there. There's plenty of them.
Here are three right here. There's another one over there. Yep.
It amazes me, and I almost found it kind of embarrassing that I did not know about the Hidden Figures women, right? I mean, they were amazing women.
Absolutely.
We should have been studying them and telling, telling girls, this is what you need to be. So I think the problem, we have to approach it multifaceted. All the things that we're doing with cyber education and cyber gen and attracting girls, I definitely think that's definitely on point. We need to keep doing that. I think the things that Emma said about how do we look at these types of careers that typically young girls are attracted to. Some of my team was talking to me about this before, and they're like, walk down the toy aisle in the store, right?
Yeah.
What do you see in the aisle for the girls? What do you see in the aisle for the boys? You go in the boys aisle, you see all the building blocks, right? The Legos, the this, the that. We have dresses and princesses and all those kinds, which are great things, but they don't necessarily put you in that mind frame of what's there for you. So I think we have a multi-pronged approach, but I do think we have a responsibility to be present, and the men in a lot of these companies have to understand that this is an issue and they need more women in key leadership positions, or else they're not going to draw women in their workforce.
Absolutely.
Can I just add one example, I think, that really drove this home for me? And because I was thinking about this panel, when I saw this on the news this week, there's a young lady that at 17 months old, she was diagnosed with leukemia. So she spent the early years of her life in the hospital with doctors, with nurses, caring for her. And so when she grew up, she decided that she wanted to go into the medical field. And so they were talking to her about why did she make that decision. And she said, I spent most of my life in the hospital in my early years, so I didn't know anything else. She said, but I want to take care of children. And she said, when I was in the hospital, all my doctors were girls. That's what she said. Yeah. She said, all of my doctors were girls. So I wanted to go into the medical field. And I thought that was like a poster child for understanding the impact and the role that models actually play in our lives.
Yeah, great example. Doreen?
So continuing we all need to be models, there are probably, a dozen topical organizations that have sprung up over the last just few years that run the gamut. Some of them are international, some of them are defense specific. There are great partnerships that have been formed, and those type of organizations are needed because we need to catch up. So if you look at the Women in Defense, which is part of the National Defense Association, if you look at the National Science Foundation, Women in Cybersecurity, if you look within the UK, they have their own Women's in Security organization. And then even recently, and was sharing with the team, Palo Alto Networks in California has teamed with the Girl Scouts. Shock, surprise, there are now 18 badges for the Girl Scouts in cybersecurity. Isn't that incredible? So it's the organizations, but it's the organizations then making a difference. And to me, the Girl Scouts is just one of a set of examples where there's some significant leaps. That'll be a topical conversation at dinner tonight, right? I just thought that was amazing. Please go and do your Google searches. So it's the education from the early ages. It's recognizing that there are women's organizations out there who are working with the public and private sector in order to address the need, to understand that the U.S. government is looking at is implementing a whole of society approach, and then it's what we have to do individually. So I'll tie back into my opening comment. We all need to be moms, whether you're male or female out there. I'm going to put the mom in there. You all need to have the tough conversations with your kids that when they're looking at options, to put that option in front of them. Umpteen years ago when I was in high school, that really was more of a guy thing to go toward the heavy math classes. And I had the abilities. My mother didn't say, oh, you're a girl, you can't do that, or she didn't even think that. She just said, okay, there's an opportunity, go for it. And so whether we're male or female, we need to be the moms. We need to provide our children and those that we mentor, regardless of age, the broader set of options when they're looking at careers, or they're looking at a next career, or they're looking at putting money into a certification, okay? ISSP, ISSE, ISSO, all of those wonderful things, because cyber is going to touch all of our lives. And as females, and because we take on many roles, we are truly all the balls in the air kind of gender, if you will. We need to recognize that we will be involved across a broader gambit of, I don't want to say careers, but we will be involved across our communities, our churches, within our families, myself taking care of my parents, and in our careers, our jobs, to a maximum extent. And cyber touches all of that. And we need to then make that part of that mentoring, that not making cyber look like it's something you have a choice of doing, like it won't touch you. If you go into, I don't know, lawn care, if you open a landscape company, well, guess what? Your bills are online. You're going to bill your customers online. You probably schedule your teams online, right? They're probably not all co-located in the same community. They're probably from a variety of communities. They're probably going to have text reminders. So there's nothing, even at the most blue-collar career or blue-collar job that anybody could have that isn't going to touch the internet and isn't going to need some element of privacy and cybersecurity. So we need to be the moms, we need to be the great mentors, and then be a part of that ecosystem, if you will, of all of those activities that are going on, public, private, national, and global.
Okay, so a question. Oh, good. Admiral?
Yes, thank you.
Hi, I'd like to expand on that just a little bit. So you talk about the moms and the role models and the mentors. And all of that is incredibly important. I myself have had the opportunity to have people in my life who pushed me. It's not just offering, but pushed you to say, you need to go do this.
Right.
You are able and capable to move to the next step and do something really challenging. And one of those incredible role models for me is in this room today, and it just happens to be her birthday. So Betsy Hight, thank you so much.
You're welcome. I did pretty well, didn't I?
It's a small world with us women in cyber.
Okay, I have a question for you. How many of you are going to commit to do something to get more women, more girls into cyber? And if you can, if you are comfortable, stand up and tell us what that is, please. Microphone.
Yeah, please.
So hi, Linda Hutchinson with Sienna. And before I came here, I actually left corporate and started my own risk management consultant firm in SMB space. And the reason was, I looked at and I thought, you think of all the technology you just mentioned. it's not about the tech. It's about the people and the processes and how you pull that together for a system so that we all can bring that together. And as I got there, I was amazed at just how bad it was. And then a key passion, and several of the women in Siena people can attest to it, is I'm a double E. And so part of what I live half my life doing is trying to go back to middle and high school women and say, look at STEM careers. And so marrying the two, it's amazing to me, one, how in general we can't get women to pursue STEM specifically. And they know so little about cyber, although they're attached to this. And so every day, I'm having that battle with my own son and with people that we work with. And as millennials are coming into the commercial workforce and government, they don't know how to secure this. How are they going to secure our business? So for me, it's every day. And I look at women like you, and I want to say thank you for being the trailblazers to help all of us get more engaged. And for Walker for helping us to sponsor this, and AFCEA. Because without you, we're never going to get it off the ground. So thank you.
Tricia Johnson from Siena. I am the U.S. lead for Women at Siena, and I just wanted to share something because it does work. We have a program called The Confidence Code, which is based on the book, The Confidence Code. If you have not read it, you definitely should, or at least go on YouTube and definitely search for that. But as a result of, we had some in-person and virtual classes. I nominated someone to be the lead and run one of the programs in Atlanta. She did so, and as a result, she has applied and been accepted to a graduate program at Georgia Tech. And she called me and told me the reason I did that is because I learned that I could lead a whole room of women in the Confidence Code, and so I know now that I can advance my my education. But she also said that she was the first woman in her family to have a degree, and now she'll be the first one to have a graduate degree.
Great.
My name is Jennifer Spencer. I'm from the Fort Knox area. So one of the activities, I'm also a women's outreach leader with AFCEA. One of the activities we have and close to us at the high school, middle school, and grade schools, we have a girls robotics competition. It's a day competition. We kind of organize a bunch of women in the office go assist for that day-long competition. Last year, I thought it was really important to bring my son along because I have all boys. So I think these women's outreach events are incredibly important, but I also want my boys to recognize the importance of supporting women and supporting girls and recognizing that the field does need to be more diverse, and we need everybody's support to do that, to make that happen. So.
Great, thank you.
I'm Bali Ambegauger, CEO of Centerpoint. I have actually a personal story.
Great.
A 9-year-old daughter who, my husband's a pilot for fun. We were in the plane and he was flying the plane and he said, she's very interested in, well, what does the traffic mean on the top and why does the GPS look differently? And she's very interested in how he's engaging with the other pilots and with the ground. And I said, honey, you could be the co-pilot or you take over Dad's job in the future and do this. And she said, no, Mom, I can't do that. I'm a girl.
Oh.
And that stuck with me so much because I've been an entrepreneur for the last 20 years. At least she knew that she could run the pilots and she could tell them what to do. But she thought immediately that I couldn't, this is too technical for me. From that point on, I made it my mission. I talked to my husband and said, okay, let's start pretending. So I said, look, every time the ground agent talked, I said, oh, look, that's another pilot. That's a woman. And I also am co-pilot with my husband. And I was telling her that without me and without him, we need each other. So this was about just a few months ago. She's become so engaged so much so that she actually wants to take over now. And she keeps talking about how by 10 years old, she's going to be doing this, and she's so excited about doing it. And you're absolutely right. It's about role models, and it's about listening to them as well when they say they can't do something. And there's so many simple things that they can do and expand on, but they immediately say that they can't do it because they haven't had a role model yet to do it.
Excellent. Thank you.
My name is Christina Skropka, and I'm from Germany. I'm the first woman on the AFCEA Board of Directors from Europe.
Excellent.
And I'm not from STEM. I come from banking and communication. And I think that we should make more concrete pictures of what you could do in the IT sector as a job. Because my main job in the past 9 years was to translate the technical language to the people who have to make the decisions and are not technicians. So I think we can open up our projects much more than only in the STEM area, which is very, very important. Latest study from yesterday in Germany is that we need in Germany 500,000 talents by 2020. So the 1.5 million, I guess
that was on the low end.
Corrected.
The high end was 3.5.
Yeah. Make better pictures. We need people in law. We need people in communication. So everybody who's interested, I'm not technician, but I learned how to grab the major parts of IT security, and I work for a high security company where we do cryptographics, and I can get the point and bring it over to those who are also non-technicians. And I'm very happy with the support by AFCEA International that we are setting up a group of women in AFCEA in Europe very soon. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon. I'm Mita Holiday with HPE, Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. And my call to action was very immediate. I have a niece who's a doctor. She just got a fellowship in medical informatics. Her father's an engineer. Her mother is a nurse practitioner. A personal story, she developed a fever at 8 months old, and it went on for almost a week. And finally, this doctor was able to bring her fever down. So she is a doctor now. But I immediately texted her and told her 1.5 million jobs in cyber for cyber professionals by 2020.
Okay, now you can modify it to 3.5 million.
That's right.
Great. Well, thank you all so much for coming. Remember that you can get your badge scanned on the way out, and our expert badge scanner is waving her hand in the back. Let me just say that my hope is next time this will be professional cyber, not women in cyber. So all of us have to take a role in making that happen. Over to you.
I'd like to just make a few closing comments, and I didn't stand in line because I get the main microphone up here, so I didn't need to. But just a personal story from my side. When I went off to college, I was very much encouraged to get the MRS degree. And you all know what the MRS degree is. And my parents encouraged me to go into business because I could always be a secretary if the husband thing didn't work out. And I have said, and it's embarrassing to say that, it was just a cultural thing with my parents. They're wonderful people, but that's just the way I was raised. And I have, throughout my career, I've seen so many instances where you could take a engineer or a STEM person and teach them business, but it's very hard to take somebody with a business degree and then go back and teach them the engineering. So I have 2 daughters, and as they were being in junior high, early high school, we were having a conversation one time, and I mentioned when they go off to college that I would pay for a STEM degree. To which my younger one said, that means if I don't major in STEM, I can't go to college. And I said, oh no, you're more than welcome to go to college, and I will help you fill out the forms for the grants, because I am paying for a STEM degree. And truth be told, if they had come back at some point and said, I really want to major in English, I would have encouraged them to do a dual degree. But I now have a daughter at Duke majoring in biology and chemistry, and my youngest daughter has been accepted to 5 engineering programs next year when she graduates. So that's the way, but from an early age, thank you. From early age, we just set the expectation, if you're going to college, you're going to major in STEM. And if later on you want to go back and get a Spanish degree or an English degree or become a chef, that's great. We'll help you do that as well. But the first degree needs to be a STEM degree. And anyway, that's just a personal story coming from the background that I had. And I went to, last month, I was at a conference that they had a Women in Cyber reception. And the giveaway there was a sweatshirt that said, I'm a woman in cybersecurity and I catch bad guys. And I am not technical at all. I didn't, but I got the sweatshirt and I wear it and I feel so cool making people think that I'm a woman in cyber. So my hat's off to all of you. Your stories, the background, the inspiration that you have. Admiral Hight, thank you so much for putting this together. I think the dialogue has been tremendous. I loved hearing the stories from the audience. I want to thank Sienna and Walker and Associates again for sponsoring this and making this possible. Jane Brightwell, 5 years ago when we started this, she stood up from the very beginning and believed in this program and started sponsoring it and got Walker and Associates and Sienna to step up, and they've been our long-term sponsors ever since and have made these panels and the reception possible. So we definitely want to thank you all for doing that. We thank you all for being here and for your interest. I want to mention again, you can see on the screen, we have at the bottom line, we have a Women in AFCEA reception at 4 o'clock today in the Sharp Street lobby. It is not just for women, it is for men as well, but it's to honor our panelists here and to give women a chance to network. Susan is in the back, she has tickets. If you sat there, and Clarice is in the back, and Mamike is in the back. So see one of those three for your ticket, and you get the drink ticket for the reception. And then Stephanie Hutchins is in the back, and Stephanie is scanning for the continuing education if you would like to have your badge scanned. And I think that is the end of my notes. I thank you very much. Please join us for the reception and enjoy the rest of the content and great networking the rest of this week. Thank you.
I wanted to ask you, so